You've just watched a little story about a company called Liquid Glide. Let's discuss that further. That's pretty amazing, huh? That product is a nanotechnology. It's a coating that you can put on bottles that allows the contents of those bottles to glide out. The tomato sauce video went viral. Okay, so one thing you would think is, who would be the main product for this MIT-based startup with a cool nanotechnology that you can put in bottles, stuff glides out, and it's not going to harm the food. I should say that. You can put food in it and it's not going to be an issue. Who would be the customer for that? Well, you'd think for yourself, Heinz. Sell it to Heinz. We'd finally get this. We'd finally get the tomato sauce that works. Well, one exercise that was done with Liquid Glide, it was to go through and actually list all of the potential customers for the product. And actually, Heinz tomato sauce makers came up as number 76 on that list. It's number 76. And you can see why. It's not 100% clear that it's in Heinz's interest for people to be able to take the whole of the tomato ketchup out of the bottle. They may end up selling less ketchup. It's not really going to drive sales, even though customers of Heinz would love it. It's one of those situations where when you have a good position in a market, you look for adoption of products, of new technologies that are going to increase the number of customers you have. If they're just going to satisfy additional customers, but not really drive them to spend much more on the bottle, although maybe they could, that's a bit of an issue. You could, of course, go to Heinz's competitors, but they've got a long way ahead of them. So Liquid Glide didn't do that. You might be able to think of other categories, such as toothpaste that's depicted here. That would be great. But it has the same problem. It has the same problem that Heinz had. So you're not going to go to Colgate either. No, instead, you want to go to a customer who has the unique problem of wanting to have a product that is hard to get out of a bottle, but needs to get out of a bottle to work, and is even harder than tomato ketchup. And the answer Liquid Glide found was Elmer's glue. Glue has a problem. You want it to stick to everything except the container it's in. Liquid Glide's solution was perfect for just that. So how do you go? What's the process by which you would put all of this to work? Now I'm going to list here, I'm not going to run through it in great detail. You have access to the slides. The steps you might pursue. There's no, this is just a sensible approach. There's nothing magical about it. The key thing is that you do it. So the first step is to identify all the potential beachhead customer segments. You want a short list of the ideal beachhead customers, and then you want to ask yourself, can you create real value for customers or a group of them? And what are you going to need to experiment and learn on before you understand and identify that ideal customer? Product market fit is a very hard thing. Everyone will tell you that. But the starting point is a list of customers and a theory as to why your product will be valued to them. What you then do is you prioritize those customers on the basis of creating value to them and also the amount that you can capture. So you have to think about, what is the lifetime value of a customer and what is the cost of acquiring that customer? If the lifetime value is short, you're not going to be able to capture much value from them. If the cost of customer acquisition is very high, it might not be worthwhile pursuing those customers. You have to find some potentially viable markets where you've struck a good balance between value creation and value capture, at least theoretically. The second step is to strategically rank those alternative beachheads. You have to think about sequencing. That is, your goal is not just to find a beachhead, but find a beachhead that will allow you to transition and sell your product through the early and late majorities as well. This is something that's called crossing the chasm. It's quite a difficult thing to think about, and I'll provide some readings about that. You also have to make sure that there's fit between your customer choice and the rest of your entrepreneurial strategy. It's so easy to start it with the question of which customers should I serve, because it's so easy to understand. But you might already have constraints on other parts of your strategy, and so you have to work out if it's all going to fit together. Obviously, we're just talking about in this lecture choosing the customer, but I wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. Finally, in steps 3 and 2, you are going to effectively end up testing 2 and choosing 1, and you'll be doing that invariably at all levels, but including a customer. You'll have to experiment and learn, and then you'll have to choose which one you're going to pursue. As I said, this is actually a more complicated question than we can deal with in this lecture. So it's worthwhile coming back and revisiting this when you go through the exercise with your ventures of choosing the customer. As a final stepping point, I want to show you how difficult this is, this notion of choosing a customer and also gaining product market fit. And I want to do it with the example of Lytro. Lytro is a company that was founded in 2010-2011, very science-based, and promised right at the beginning to revolutionize photography. Let me play a video that shows their initial product.
Hello, my name is Eric Cheng. I'm Lytro's Director of Photography. Many of you who have purchased a Lytro camera are probably stopped all the time by friends and strangers who want to know what it is that you're holding. When that happens to me, I like to give them a little demo of the camera, and what I like to do is something very simple, and it's something I'm going to show you today called the Show Me. Ask your friend to take out an object of significance, something he might want to be photographed with. Have him present this object to you and hold your hand further out. Light field pictures are more refocusable when objects in the frame are clearly at different depths. Turn your camera on and in everyday mode, zoom out all the way by sliding your finger along the zoom slider. Approach until the front of the Lytro camera is about 5 inches from the object in your friend's hand. The Lytro camera is just under 5 inches in length, so one way to easily visualize 5 inches is to use the camera itself. Measure the Lytro camera with your thumb and middle finger. Keeping your fingers the same distance apart, slide your hand forward until your thumb is at the front of the camera. Your middle finger is now about 5 inches away from the front of the camera. This is where your foreground subject should be. Note that the subject in the foreground is a little bit blurry in the viewfinder. This is good. If there is nothing blurry in your picture, there will be nothing to refocus. Living pictures taken this way will have a large refocus range, and you'll be able to clearly refocus on the presented object, your friend, and on the background. Give it a try and share your pictures with us on our Facebook page or at Lytro on Twitter. Happy shooting!
So this was the initial Lytro product. It was a small, simple camera, very elegant. Steve Jobs loved the design. And you could just take a picture and you could do everything that was promised there regarding refocusing. And they thought it was going to change how we thought about photography. But notice, who was their customer here? They were choosing a camera that was very easy to carry around, very easy to use. It had a drawback. It was low resolution. Now that's interesting at a time when we were seeing smartphones take off with higher resolution cameras for starters, and digital cameras themselves were becoming higher and more specialized. So they've come into the market with something that is worse on one level, although it allows you to do something that you can't do otherwise, which is take a picture without worrying about whether it's in focus. So you can do things like this. You take this picture of this butterfly, but then you can refocus it later on to a nicer picture. Okay, this product sold for $400 or something like that. It didn't work out. It didn't revolutionize anything. So the company pivoted. What did it pivot to? It pivoted to a few things. It tried to license its technology. So it had NASA, the US Army as potential customers, but it also released a new $1,500 camera right at the top end of the digital market, which was aimed at professional photographers. So this was not going to compromise on resolution. Okay, but this camera had another problem, is that it couldn't take moving shots, action shots. Now, the issue associated with that is action shots the one area where it's very difficult for cameras and also certainly photographers to focus and then shoot. If you had this technology where you can capture the entire light field and therefore focus after the fact, wouldn't you love for it to work in an action shot where that's a real issue? It couldn't do that. This product failed. They tried opening a retail store in Tokyo to see if they could demonstrate the products and sell that way. That's a different channel as opposed to being a different customer. And then finally, late 2015, they decided to move towards virtual reality and video.
5 years ago, I reported on this, a camera from a startup called Lytro, which housed some quite magical optical smarts. Instead of taking a flat 2D image, it captured a scene in all its 3D glory. As a result, you could change the focus after you'd actually taken the shot, or even subtly shift the perspective. It did this by taking in so-called light rays onto the sensor from all distances in the scene. Clever as it was, Lytro's consumer camera and subsequent prosumer model never took off, proving too pricey to tempt shutterbugs away from the trusted bigger brands. Well, now from the ashes, a new phoenix has arisen. A beast of a camera giving movie makers a new palette of creative tools. And this is it, Lytro Cinema, capturing a simply staggering amount of information from the world around it. It's got millions of tiny lenses inside, and that's sucking in light into a 755 megapixel sensor. The end result is in fact more like a 4K image, using the same core light field technology as the still cameras. Knowing the distance of objects or people in front of the lens means they can be isolated and replaced more easily than with today's blue or green screen technology. Of course, as with the original cameras, you can decide where to focus the shot in the footage after you've captured it, or change the perspective on a scene, even do crazy things with motion. But doesn't this newfound creative palette mean the director's vision can be tinkered with?
No, in fact, what we do is we record as metadata what the decision was made on set, and that's the first thing what we render out. We also record a whole lot of other aperture views, which means different perspectives, and we offer that array of different perspectives and a whole range of refocus range to make your shot different from when you originally controlled it. It should enable creativity in filmmaking rather than remove it.
Saying that we can lock it in is one thing, and actually achieving it is really a very different thing. And somebody anywhere in the path, an editor. Editors do fantastically important things for movies, but they're not the people who should be shaping the images.
Lytro clearly has one eye on the next generation of filmmakers, those producing content in virtual reality. It's developed a light-filled VR rig called the Emerge. Content made with this camera would let you move around live-action VR environments, something impossible today where you're rooted to a particular spot. This kind of so-called computational imaging technology might be compelling, but of course it's not cheap. Renting the cinema rig starts at $125,000. Right now it's aimed at the pros, but who knows, a few years down the road we may just see it re-emerge as a creative tool for budding filmmakers everywhere.
you can see there that things changed for Lytro. This is a completely different vertical, a completely different space. But they finally found, they didn't have to just produce a premium camera. They had to produce an expensive camera that would service an entire different class of professional clientele. Quite a difficult choice. A very different market. And now we are 5-6 years later, and maybe they are finding product market fit. Now you can read all about this in this Wired article by Jason Rosenthal, who was the CEO who took over from the founder and who made that dramatic change to its business. It's a really great read, so I recommend that to everyone. We're in 2018 now, and in March of this year, it turned out it was all over for Lytro. The company decided to shut down. Obviously, all those pivots didn't work, and the former employees, they're going to Google. I guess that's an interesting way this has all ended up. You'll notice that there's some interesting effects that are appearing in mobile phones that are very Lytro-like, but I guess its journey is over.